She only wanted scraps. He only wanted solitude. But when a desperate widow offered to help him hunt the cursed dust storms for a crust of bread, neither imagined the pain, truth, and love that would unravel their lives forever. Before we dive deeper into this twisted story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and enjoy. The knock came like a whisper against the wind, soft, unsure, nearly lost in the rustle of sagebrush curling at the edges of the weathered porch. Jacob Dust Morrison didn't move right away. He was at his workbench, cleaning the brass fittings of his storm-chasing gear while a baby's cradle sat nearby, tiny fists stirring under a quilt stitched long ago by a woman whose name he no longer dared speak aloud. The frontier had a way of wearing things down: equipment, hope, men, and Jacob had learned to let knocks pass. Most folks didn't knock anymore, not on a shack this far out on the dust plains, and not on a door owned by a man who hunted the devil winds for a living. But then came the second knock, louder, more desperate. Jacob stood, his spurs jingling softly against the floorboards. By the time he opened the door, the sun had dropped low enough to bleed orange across the endless expanse of dust and scrub, casting long shadows that made the woman before him look like more ghost than flesh. She was thin, not the kind that came from vanity, but the kind that suggested days without proper meals. Her dress hung off her shoulders like it belonged to someone else. Dust clung to her hem, and her arms, both of them, were wrapped tight around a swaddled child that wasn't hers. "I'm not here to beg," she said quickly, voice hoarse. "Not for me. I saw your baby through the window. Just thought maybe you'd let me watch her a bit for a slice of bread. Maybe the crust if it's easier to part with." Jacob said nothing. Not right away. His eyes dropped to the child in her arms. The bundle twitched once, breathing, thank God. Then he looked back at the woman. She wasn't lying. That much he could tell. But she was on the edge of something: starvation, maybe, or worse, hope. The kind that cracked people when it got denied. "Name?" he asked finally, his voice flat from disuse. "June," she said. "June Hartwell. That's your baby." June's arms tightened around her burden. "No, she's gone. Buried up near Devil's Backbone Ridge. But I remember how to hold one." Jacob stepped aside. The door creaked wider. "Don't touch mine unless I say so." "I wouldn't," June whispered, stepping through like she might break if the floor gave even a little. Inside, warmth met her like a slap. Not the rich kind, but a lived-in heat, the smell of oil and metal polish from Jacob's storm hunting equipment. Baby Anna let out a hiccup and settled again. June's eyes went soft. Jacob poured water into a tin cup and slid it toward her without a word. She reached for it with both hands, trembling so bad half of it sloshed out. "You walk far?" he asked. "For days. Had a mule the first two. Last 2 days on foot." She wiped her mouth, ashamed of the speed with which she'd emptied the cup. "From where?" "Don't matter." Jacob didn't argue. He didn't need her whole story, just the part that explained what kind of woman offered to babysit a stranger's child for bread. The baby stirred. June looked toward the cradle. She didn't move closer, just watched, chest rising with something she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. Jacob noticed. He walked over, lifted the child with practiced ease, and held her with the same quiet care a craftsman held a tool he'd made himself. "Her name's Anna," he said. June nodded. "She's beautiful. You any good with babies, June?" "I was a mother," she said too quickly. Then quieter, still a maybe, just not one with arms full anymore. Jacob studied her, the way her jaw twitched, the rawness in her throat, like every word was something torn from under the skin. He motioned to a chair. "You can sit. You won't get bread till after." "After what?" "After I see you mean it. Talk's easy. So is looking soft at a baby. You sit. Don't touch nothing. Don't lie. That earns you bread." June didn't flinch. She moved to the chair and lowered herself like someone who'd been on their feet too long. Her knees shook. Her fingers flexed in her lap. Jacob laid Anna back in the cradle and returned to his workbench. He didn't polish the brass fittings, just stared at them. "Wasn't always just me," he said after a while, voice low. "Had a wife, Mary. She passed birthing Anna." June blinked back something hot. I'm sorry. Don't be. She died fighting. June's breath hitched. She didn't say it, but she hadn't fought anything in weeks. Not since Devil's Backbone Ridge. Not since the dust storm had taken everything, including a daughter too small for a name. I'm not here to take anything, she said. I've done wrong in the past. Stolen bread, lied once or twice, but not today. Not now. I needed to see a baby breathing again. That struck something. Jacob didn't show it, but his hand curled tighter around the edge of the workbench. You say your girl's up near Devil's Backbone? Yeah. She got a name? Didn't live long enough to get one. Jacob nodded slowly. She got a grave? She got me, June said. On my knees in the dirt. That's all. Silence again. Then, unexpectedly, Anna let out a soft cry. Not a scream, just a whimper, enough to pull Jacob from the bench. He lifted her once more, but she squirmed against his chest. Here, he said suddenly, walking toward June. Take her. June froze. You said? I said, not unless I say so. I'm saying so. She reached out slowly, arms trembling, and took Anna into her chest. The baby calmed instantly. June's breath caught. It wasn't joy. Not exactly. Just a weight. She remembered a warmth she'd forgotten. She knows, June whispered. Knows when arms ain't afraid to hold her. Jacob stood over her for a moment, something unreadable in his gaze. Then he turned away and began slicing the day-old bread. Not much, just a third. He handed it to her without ceremony. You earned it. Thank you, she said, and she meant it so deep her hands shook more than before. She ate slowly, mindful not to spill crumbs on Anna's swaddle. You planning on staying in these parts? Jacob asked. Don't know, she admitted. Don't got anywhere to be. You'll sleep in the storm shelter tonight. June nodded. More than I deserve. Tomorrow we'll see if you're worth more than crumbs. She looked up sharply. You mean? I mean you're holding my baby like she's still yours. That ain't nothing. Might be something. Outside, the evening winds picked up. Dust swept across the porch, biting at the wood, scratching at the window. But inside, Anna slept steady against a chest that had once known loss. And June, though worn to the bone and hollow from sorrow, breathed in sync with something again. The night settled slow. Jacob didn't speak more. He handed her a lantern and pointed to the storm shelter built into the hillside behind the shack. June obeyed, Anna already back in his arms. But neither forgot that moment, that flicker of something warmer than lamplight. The storm shelter was old but solid, built to withstand the devil winds that scoured these plains clean. June had slept in worse places, under wagons, beside dying fires, once in an abandoned mine shaft thick with bats and bitter air. But this shelter held something different, a strange sense of permission, of allowed stillness. A bedroll had been spread in the corner, clean enough to not itch too much. A single blanket hung over a wooden crate, clearly placed with thought, not accident. The lantern Jacob had given her swung gently on an iron hook above, casting long amber shadows against the reinforced walls. June didn't sleep right away. Her stomach, though less hollow now, seemed confused by the food. Her limbs ached from walking, but not enough to pull her under. Instead, she sat against the wall, knees drawn up to her chest, eyes fixed on the lantern's flame. She should have cried, should have let it all out, her child, her shame, the unspoken things done just to make it another day. But the tears didn't come. She'd shed too many already. Somewhere along Devil's Backbone Ridge, she'd run dry. Wind whispered through the ventilation grates, carrying the night sounds, the soft shifting of equipment in Jacob's workshop, the gentle creak of wood settling, and in the distance, the faint whimper of a child being rocked back to sleep. June closed her eyes. Morning broke not with sunlight but with the thud of boots near the shelter doors. Jacob didn't knock, just pushed the heavy doors open and stepped inside, backlit by the pale gray dawn. He carried a tin mug in one hand, steam rising from it, and a bucket in the other. You sleep some? June said, brushing dust from her dress. He set the bucket down near the bedroll. Water's clean. Wasn't sure if you'd run off. didn't have anywhere to run to. Jacob grunted, handing her the mug. It was strong coffee, bitter as bark. She drank it anyway. He studied her for a beat longer than necessary, then turned. "Come on. If you're not dead, you can work." Jacob wasn't a man who gave instructions more than once. He moved like someone who'd been working alone too long, efficient, silent, hard-edged. June followed without asking where they were going. He led her to the equipment shed where brass instruments gleamed alongside leather harnesses and coils of rope thick as a man's wrist. Storm-chasing gear, built to survive the devil winds that could strip paint from wood and flesh from bone. "That's a barometer," he said, pointing at a brass cylinder. "Tells me when the storms are coming. This here's the anchor rig. Keeps the wagon from blowing away when we're in the thick of it." "You chase the dust storms?" June asked. "Hunt them," Jacob corrected. "There's things in those storms. Valuable things. Glass formed by lightning, rare minerals, sometimes even gold nuggets carried from places no man's ever seen." He pointed to a reinforced wagon with metal plates welded to its sides. "That's how we stay alive in the devil winds. You know how to handle leather." "I know how to try." "Good enough." He didn't watch her long, just pointed her to a pile of harnesses that needed mending and left her to it. The morning passed in small tasks and smaller words. June mended the leather in slow, focused silence, pausing only to rub the stiffness from her knuckles. Jacob moved between chores, always near but never close, calibrating instruments, checking storm charts, oiling the wagon's reinforced joints. Once he stopped near her workstation and asked without turning, "Why here?" June looked up. Her hands were stained from leather dye and oil. "Didn't choose it. Just kept walking. Your light was the first I saw in miles." Jacob didn't respond. Just kept tightening a bolt on the anchor rig. Inside the shack, Anna stirred again near noon. June wasn't told to go to her. She just heard the cry and followed it. Jacob was still outside, checking weather vanes. June washed her hands in the basin by the door before lifting the baby gently into her arms. Anna settled quickly, blinking up with eyes too old for her face. June swayed instinctively, whispering nonsense into the soft curls at the baby's temple. "You smell like leather and oil," came Jacob's voice from the doorway. June turned. "She doesn't seem to mind." He stepped inside, setting a storm glass against the wall. "You've held her more in 2 days than I have in weeks." "You scared of breaking her?" "I'm scared of getting used to her." "That's not the same." June didn't answer. She just lowered her cheek to Anna's head and let the silence speak. By the 3rd day, Jacob had stopped giving her instructions. She woke with the sunrise, washed with the bucket water, helped with the equipment maintenance, and sometimes took the liberty of starting the fire in the small stove. She never went into the locked equipment locker. She didn't pry about the closed trunk in the corner, and she didn't ask about the daguerreotype on the shelf, faded, yellowed, showing a young woman with gentle eyes and a man who almost smiled. On the 4th night, after Anna had been fed and the fire banked low, June sat near the window and finally asked the thing she hadn't dared before. "Why'd you let me in?" Jacob looked up from the storm chart in his hands, weather patterns mapped with careful precision. "Because you knocked and you looked like you might fall over dead if I didn't." "That simple?" "Sometimes things are." June nodded slowly, but she didn't believe him. It was on the 5th morning that the first danger came, not from within, but without. Jacob was away from the shack, down by the creek that ran behind the property, checking his weather instruments. June was feeding Anna when the riders arrived. 3 of them, men dressed in dust and meanness, the kind who didn't ask before helping themselves to someone else's claim. Their horses were lathered with sweat and foam, pushed hard across the plains. The first one swung down and looked around, lips curled in disdain. "Reckon we found Morrison's place, boys." The second spat into the dust. "Sure smells like a dust hunter's hovel." The third, older and sharper in the eyes, noticed June through the window. "Well now, this ain't the Morrison I remember." June straightened, still holding Anna. "You've got no business here." The sharp-eyed man smirked. "Lady, men like us, we make business where we find it." She didn't run. She didn't back down. Her free arm reached for the leatherworking knife on the table. Jacob will be back any minute. Good, the man said. We've got things to discuss with the dust hunter. June didn't move from the doorway, not even when the youngest tried to circle toward the equipment shed. She spoke only one sentence, but it carried like gunfire. Touch that gear and I'll gut you with this blade. The man paused, hands mid-reach. The older one laughed. Feisty. You don't know the half, June muttered. Jacob returned before things turned worse. He came from the north side of the property, carrying a weather glass, but his eyes went sharp the moment he saw the horses. The kind of sharp that made the intruders think twice. You're on my land, he said flatly. Not for long, the older man replied. Just came to talk business. You ain't talked business in 3 years, Crenshaw. Well, things change. Dust storm's been getting stronger. More valuable. Word is you found something big in the last devil wind. Jacob's grip on the weather glass didn't shift. Word's wrong. Crenshaw stepped forward slowly, hands raised in mock surrender. Now, let's not make this ugly. We just want our share of whatever storm treasure you're hoarding. Jacob's voice dropped to something colder than winter wind. You already got your share. When you left me for dead in that twister 2 years back. Crenshaw looked past him to June. Who's the girl? Jacob didn't answer. Just raised the weather glass an inch, its brass fittings gleaming. Crenshaw snorted. Fine, we'll go. But I'll be back, Morrison. Real soon. And next time I won't bring manners. They left in a cloud of dust. Jacob didn't lower his guard until they disappeared behind the ridge. That night, June spoke first. Who was he? Someone I once rode with. Partner before he got greedy. June's heart sank. He tried to kill you? By blood, not by choice, Jacob added. Left me in a devil wind with broken equipment. Said I'd be better off dead than competing. Silence. Are they coming back? Count on it. Then we need to prepare. You planning on staying now? I never said I'd leave. Jacob looked at her long. No, you didn't. The next morning didn't come gently. The barometer had dropped overnight, and the air carried that peculiar stillness that preceded the devil winds. Jacob knew the signs, the way the dust seemed to hover instead of blow, how the horses grew nervous, how even the insects went quiet. But it wasn't whether Jacob smelled when he stepped onto the porch. It was threat, and it was coming closer. Crenshaw had always been a patient kind of poison, the sort that smiled while it sank teeth deep. Jacob knew his former partner well enough to feel the clock ticking. If Crenshaw had ridden off yesterday, he'd be back soon, and not with small talk. He'd be back with men, maybe guns, and worse than either, a plan to take everything Jacob had built. Jacob had been content with solitude, hunting the storms alone, raising Anna in the spaces between the devil winds. But now, with June sleeping in the shelter and his former partner smelling weakness like a buzzard, the stakes had shifted. He wasn't just protecting a child now. He was protecting the thin thread of a life that might have meant something again. Inside, June stirred from the cot Jacob had moved into the main room the night before after the Crenshaw incident. Neither of them had said anything about it. She'd come in after dark, carried the lantern herself, and laid down across the room from Anna's cradle without asking permission. She didn't need it anymore. He'd left the rifle by the door that night. June descended from the cot silently, her bare feet brushing the worn wood. You sleep? He asked. A little, she said. Anna breathes like music. You notice that? Yeah. She's peaceful. Jacob glanced toward the cradle. She don't know what's out there. Good, June said. Let her stay that way. He poured 2 cups of coffee, bitter again but hot, and handed her one. We'll need to move the equipment closer to the house, and bring in the rifle. If Crenshaw comes, he's not bringing contracts. He's bringing violence. June took a sip. Then we make sure it stays manageable. They worked the day without wasting words. June learned to check the storm warning instruments while Jacob reinforced the shack's shutters with metal plates. He taught her how to load the rifle he kept for emergencies, not for hunting storms, but for hunting men. By midday, the sun had found teeth. It baked the dust into the boards and made the metal fittings too hot to touch without cloth. Anna fussed once, then slept again in a sling June fashioned from an old storm tarp. She wore the child against her chest as she worked, without complaint. Jacob watched them from across the yard, saw the way June moved now, deliberate, steady, not just surviving. There was something maternal in the way she shifted her body to shield Anna's face from the harsh sun, something instinctive in the way her hand never strayed far from the small weight on her chest. He'd known women who cooed while they held a child. June didn't coo, but she radiated something truer, grit, maybe, or grace. He found himself trusting her without permission. Late afternoon brought visitors again, but not the kind they feared. A wagon approached from the southern trail, old and slow, drawn by oxen that looked ready to lie down and never rise again. The driver was a man past 50, skin like leather, hat pulled low. A younger woman sat beside him, her belly round with child, her eyes darting nervously as they neared the property. Jacob stepped forward, hand near the rifle, but not on it. The man raised a hand. Peaceful, I swear it. Jacob didn't lower his stance. Name? Ezra Goodwin. This here's my daughter, Ruth. We heard tell of a dust hunter out here. Thought maybe there'd be trade. Got dried meat, beans, some medicine root if you've use for it. Jacob narrowed his eyes. You from town? Used to be. Not no more. Behind him, June appeared, Anna still sleeping in the sling. Ezra's gaze softened. Didn't know there was a woman out here. Didn't used to be, Jacob said. Ezra caught the edge in his voice and didn't pry. We ain't here to trouble you. Just trying to make it to Silver Creek before the baby comes. That's 3 days out. I know. She's stubborn. Gets it from her mama. Ruth looked down, cheeks flushed. June stepped forward. They can water the oxen. We've got some oats left. Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at the oxen, then the girl's stomach, then finally nodded. Stay by the equipment shed. I'll bring water. They shared no fire that night. Ezra and Ruth set up camp near the shed, cooking quietly over a small flame they built themselves. June brought them some leftover stew, insisted they eat the meat while it still had life in it. Ezra offered her a small pouch of crushed herbs in thanks. For aches, he said, or for breathing. Helps either way. Anna woke that night fussy, her face red with heat. June dipped the herbs in boiling water, then held the steam near the cradle. The baby quieted within minutes. You did good, Jacob said softly. It wasn't me, she replied. It was the root. Still you knew. She looked at him then, eyes shadowed but steady. I know what it is to have no one. Jacob sat beside her. The fire crackled softly. You think we can stop him? She asked. Crenshaw? Yeah. Only if we're willing to bleed for it. June didn't flinch. I've bled before. Just didn't have anyone worth bleeding for. He looked at her long and careful. You do now. June glanced toward the cradle. I think maybe I do. The next day began with silence, deep, unnatural. The kind that made birds vanish and dogs hide under porches. Jacob noticed it first. The oxen didn't low. The instruments stayed quiet. Even the wind chimes hung motionless, though the air felt electric. Then the distant rumble of hoofbeats. Not 3 riders this time. Jacob grabbed the rifle. June lifted Anna without needing to be told. Crenshaw came over the ridge with 8 men. Not 3, they. One carried a shotgun. Another had dynamite strapped to his saddle. Crenshaw himself rode a black stallion like he owned the horizon. Morning, partner, he called, smiling like a preacher at a funeral. Turn around, Jacob barked. Crenshaw dismounted. You always were unfriendly. Jacob stepped forward. This is my land. My equipment. My family. You're not welcome. Family, huh? Crenshaw glanced at June, then the baby. You replace Mary already? Jacob didn't answer. Shame, Crenshaw said. She was prettier. June moved to stand beside Jacob, Anna still pressed close. Crenshaw tilted his head. You letting your women do the posturing now? June's voice didn't waver. I'm doing more than posturing. I'm remembering faces. Crenshaw smirked. Remember this, girl. I got legal claim to half this operation. Partnership papers from before Morrison here went solo. You forged them, Jacob said. Who's going to prove it? Sheriff's in my pocket. Judge too. Jacob raised the rifle. That's so. You shoot me, Crenshaw said, and your baby loses her uncle. That's partnership blood in her too. You gave up that right when you tried to murder me in that twister. Crenshaw shrugged. Fine. I'm not here to argue. Just here to claim what's mine. Move your girl. Move your baby. You got till sundown. He turned and rode off. The others followed. No shots fired. Not yet. That night, June couldn't sleep. She sat by the cradle, watching Anna breathe. Jacob sat by the window, the rifle across his knees. You could run, he said quietly. Take her. Head north. June didn't turn. And leave you to bleed alone? You don't owe me anything. I owe Anna. I owe myself. And maybe I owe you too. You don't even know me. She knows me, June whispered, looking at the baby. That's enough. Jacob looked at her, and for the first time since she'd knocked on his door, he saw not a stranger, not a guest, but someone meant to be there. He nodded slowly. We fight at dawn. Dawn came slower than expected. The sky was the color of old brass, thick with a haze that clung to the horizon like the breath of something waiting to exhale. Jacob stood by the window long before the sun had the strength to breach the ridge. His rifle was loaded. 2 extra rounds rested on the windowsill. He'd cleaned the barrel twice, though it hadn't needed it. Sometimes a man's hands needed purpose more than his tools did. June sat nearby, spooning boiled oats into Anna's mouth with a steadiness that betrayed the fear behind her eyes. The baby chewed lazily, eyes drifting from her makeshift mother to the flicker of light creeping through the shutter cracks. She knows, June said suddenly. Jacob looked over. That something's wrong. Babies know. Maybe not in their minds, but in their bones. Jacob nodded slowly. World teaches early. She deserves better than this, June whispered, smoothing Anna's curls. She's got better, he said. Now. Neither of them had spoken about the night before, about Crenshaw's threat or the deadline that now ticked like thunder just outside the valley. But the silence wasn't ignorance. It was armor. Each word held now was a bullet saved, a breath banked for what was to come. By mid-morning, the stillness broke. Ezra Goodwin and his daughter approached from the shed, their camp broken down to almost nothing. The old man had a sawed-off tucked under his coat and the same wary squint he'd had since the day he arrived. You planning to ride out? Jacob asked, stepping onto the porch. No, Ezra said. Not without paying rent. Jacob raised an eyebrow. You let us water our oxen. Gave us fire. Kept Ruth safe here. That counts for something. You sure you want to get involved? Ezra spat into the dust. I was born involved, son. Ain't going to die hiding. Jacob looked past him to Ruth, who stood near the shed doors with a pistol gripped awkwardly in both hands. I shoot enough to miss slow, she said. It wasn't funny, but Jacob cracked a half smile anyway. We'll take all the hands we can get. The house was fortified first. June helped barricade the windows, dragging equipment crates and old planks across the glass. She nailed shut the back door and moved Anna's cradle into the storm cellar. Small, windowless, thick walls. They built a line of defense near the main approach. Upturned water troughs, spare logs, crates filled with scrap metal. Ezra and Jacob scouted the perimeter, setting trip wires anchored beneath brush, this time tied to empty cans filled with pebbles. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of burnished copper, swollen with coming heat and the scent of dust and gun oil. Jacob stood on the porch, checking his rifle's action. June sat on the steps, cradling Anna against her chest while she rocked gently with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. I ain't scared, she said. Jacob didn't look at her. I am. June didn't move. Not of dying. I've already done that once, up on that ridge when I buried her. He set the rifle down. Then what? I'm scared of losing again. Of getting to hold something good and having it ripped away because I believed too hard it might last. Jacob sat beside her. You and me both. They came at dusk. 10 riders this time, not 8. Crenshaw had brought extras. One was a kid barely old enough to shave, Another looked half-mad with eyes that twitched and a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. But the rest were hard men, hired, paid not to ask questions. Crenshaw led them down the ridge like a funeral procession, slow, confident, unafraid. The stallion beneath him gleamed like oiled black steel, tail swishing against the dry wind. Jacob stepped out first, rifle aimed but not raised. Ezra flanked him with the sawed-off. June was behind the door, pistol gripped in her apron pocket. Anna now sleeping soundly in the storm cellar behind 2 layers of reinforced oak. Crenshaw pulled up just short of the yard. "Evening," he called. Jacob didn't answer. Crenshaw laughed. "Come on, partner. This don't have to end ugly. You should leave. You always were hard-headed." Jacob took 1 step forward. "And you were always a coward, hiding behind law you bought and men you didn't raise." Crenshaw's smile faltered. "I'm taking what's mine," he said. "You can hand it over or I'll take it with smoke." Jacob's voice didn't waver. "Then bring the smoke." The first shot came from the hired man with the twitching eye. It cracked the silence like lightning, splintering the porch rail just above Jacob's shoulder. Jacob ducked, returned fire. His round caught the horse's flank, not fatal but enough to throw the rider. Then chaos. Gunfire echoed off the hills, sharp and ugly. Ezra's sawed-off blasted a hole through one man's shoulder, sending him reeling backwards, screaming. June fired from the window, missing high, but the shot made one rider dive for cover behind the water troughs. Crenshaw didn't fire at all. He watched. Jacob reloaded fast, moved from porch to crate to shed, counting breaths and bullets. Another man took a round in the thigh and crawled into the scrub. The kid panicked, dropped his weapon, and ran straight into one of the tripwires. The cans clanged like a devil's bell. He screamed, stumbled, vanished into the brush. Inside the storm cellar, Anna cried. June heard it like a dagger to the heart, but didn't move. Not yet. One more round rang out. Then silence. Smoke curled from the rifle barrels. Dust settled in waves. The yard looked like a broken game board, weapons discarded, blood darkening the dirt in ugly puddles. Crenshaw still sat his horse. Jacob leveled the rifle at him. "This your idea of justice?" Crenshaw sneered. "This is the cost of what you stole." "I didn't steal Mary from you." "No," Crenshaw spat. "But you got what I never could, a life." His hand twitched toward his holster. June saw it from the doorway. She stepped out. "Don't," she said. Crenshaw looked at her. "You think I won't shoot a woman? I think you'll die trying." Something in her eyes made him pause. His fingers loosened. Jacob didn't wait. One shot. Quick, clean. Crenshaw fell. His body hit the ground with a thud that felt final. It didn't take long to clean up. The hired men who could still walk dragged their wounded and vanished. The boy who'd fled never came back. Ezra helped bury the bodies near the ridge. Simple holes, no crosses. Crenshaw went deeper, alone. When it was done, Jacob washed his hands in the trough and stood over the dirt, silent. June came to him. "You okay?" "No," he said, "but I will be." She didn't try to comfort him, just stood beside him in the quiet. That night, Anna slept through the dark without waking once. June did not. She sat by the cradle, whispering prayers she thought she'd forgotten, soft, ragged thanks to a God she'd once cursed beneath her breath, but never truly abandoned. Jacob came in late, blood clean from his shirt, shoulders heavy with grief and something deeper. "Wasn't supposed to end like that," he said. "Maybe it didn't," she replied. He looked at her. "We're still here. She's still breathing. That's an ending I can live with." Jacob sat beside her, closer this time. "She's not mine, you know. Not by blood." June blinked. "What?" "Mary was already with child when I met her. The man ran off. Ate them both. Never told a soul." June looked down at Anna, sleeping with a fist curled near her chin. "She's still yours," she whispered. "In every way that matters." Jacob exhaled long and slow. "I don't know what comes next." "Neither do I," June said. "But I'm not going anywhere." He looked at her, then really looked, and for the first time since the knock, since the crust of bread, since the baby in her arms, he allowed himself to believe in something past tomorrow. The valley woke slowly in the days after Crenshaw's blood sank into the dust, as if nature itself needed time to believe the violence had finally stopped. Birds returned first, timid at dawn, singing cautious notes as if testing the silence. Then came the wind, gentler now, brushing through the sagebrush like a mother's hand, smoothing the brow of a fevered child. Jacob stood by the property line that morning, one hand resting on a fence post Crenshaw had tried to claim with forged papers and lies. He stared out at the ridgeline where the riders had vanished, where shadows still lingered despite the sun rising with full intent. Behind him, the shack was quiet. Anna slept. June tended the fire, and the wounds of the past 5 days hung in the air like smoke that hadn't found a way out yet. He hadn't slept much. A few hours here and there, enough to keep standing, but his thoughts never fully left the porch, the rifle still leaning beside the door, the ground where his former partner fell. Jacob had buried many things on this land: equipment, livestock, love. But burying a man who'd once shared his campfire, even twisted as Crenshaw had become, left a different weight on his soul, one that no storm could wash clean. Inside, June stirred a pot of thin stew. Food was running low again. They'd survived the attack, but not without cost. 3 bullets remained for the rifle. One of the oxen had gone lame, too spooked to pull straight. The root cellar held little more than dry beans and faith. But it wasn't the food that worried her. It was Jacob. He'd grown quieter, more watchful. She could see it in the way he moved. Efficient, yes, but heavier, like something inside him had cracked, and he was too proud to show the pieces. June understood that weight. She'd carried it once herself. Still did, but hers had shifted the moment Anna first reached for her finger in the dark. By midday, Jacob came inside without a word and poured himself coffee that had gone bitter with reheating. June didn't ask where he'd been. She set a bowl of stew down and sat across from him. "You're not eating," she said. "Not hungry. Anna's going to feel it. Babies always do." He didn't reply. Just sipped the coffee and stared out the window. June leaned forward. "You did what you had to do." Jacob's jaw twitched. "I know. Then stop punishing yourself for it." He looked at her then, not sharply, just wearily. "I never thought it'd be like this, killing someone who once saved my life." "You didn't kill your partner," she said softly. "That man died a long time ago in some devil wind. You only buried what was left." That struck something in him. He set the mug down and ran a hand through his hair. "I've had to make peace with a lot of things these past years," she added. "But grief, that one doesn't ask for permission. It just moves in." Jacob leaned back, eyes on the rafters. "He used to cover my back in the storms. Taught me how to read the wind patterns, how to know when a twister was about to birth lightning glass." June looked down. Then maybe he wasn't always poison. "No," Jacob whispered. "Just got bit by it somewhere." That evening, the wind picked up again, but this time it carried voices. Jacob stepped outside, rifle ready but unraised. A small group was making their way up the trail. 4 figures, 2 on horseback, the others on foot. Town folk by the look of it. Men and women he hadn't seen in years, not since Mary's funeral, when most came out of obligation and left before the dirt settled on the coffin. He narrowed his eyes as they approached. The lead rider, a broad woman with her hair tied back in a no-nonsense braid, raised a hand. "Jacob Morrison?" "I am. We heard there was trouble out this way." Men riding hard, gunfire echoing past the hills. There was. The woman dismounted. She carried herself like someone used to leading without shouting. "Name's Bertha Holmes. I run the general store in Dust Creek. And when a man kills his enemies to protect his child and the land he built, folks ought to know." June stepped onto the porch, Anna in her arms. Bertha gave a faint nod. "You must be June." "I am," she replied cautiously. Bertha turned back to Jacob. "We've got food, tools, hands if you'll take them." Jacob blinked. "Why?" "Because you didn't run," she said. "Because sometimes a man stands his ground not to win, but so others don't have to fight the same war." The others behind her unloaded sacks of grain, jars of preserves, even a bundle of fresh linens. One of the younger women, barely 20, approached June and smiled shyly. "I've got a baby at home too. Anna's a beautiful name." June's grip on Anna tightened. "She's not mine." The girl tilted her head. "You sure about that?" June looked down at the child who was staring back up at her with wide, patient eyes. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. That night they had bread. Real bread, salted butter, a stew thick enough to stick to a spoon. Anna gurgled on a blanket beside the hearth, kicking her feet with the kind of joy that only came when a child felt truly safe. June watched her with a kind of awe. Jacob watched June. He noticed how she leaned forward when Anna squealed, how her lips curled into a smile without her even realizing it. He saw the care in her hands, the way she tucked the blanket just right around the baby's legs. These weren't acts of someone helping. They were the motions of someone who belonged. After the visitors left, promising to return in a week, June stepped outside with a pail of water and stood beneath the stars. Jacob followed a few moments later. "You didn't have to stay," he said. June didn't look at him. "I didn't have anywhere else." "That's not the same." She turned then. "I know." He stepped closer. "You've done more for Anna in a week than I managed in months." "That's not true." "It feels true." June sighed. "You gave her a home, a roof. You stood between her and death. That's more than most children get." Jacob looked up at the stars. "You believe what Crenshaw said about God poking holes?" "I don't know," June said, "but I think maybe he lets light through wherever we're cracked." Silence. Then Jacob reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, smooth, polished, shaped like a dove. "I carved it the night you arrived," he said, placing it in her hand. "Didn't know why. Think maybe I do now." June looked at it, then at him. "You're not alone anymore, Jacob." He met her gaze. "Neither are you." That night, Jacob didn't sleep on the porch. He brought Anna's cradle closer to the hearth, sat beside June while she rocked the baby until she drifted off. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. The morning after the town folk left, the homestead felt unfamiliar in the strangest way. Not because of danger. There was none. No hoofbeats on the ridge, no shadows circling in the distance. The tripwires remained untouched, the warning cans still and silent. But the unease came from within, like the air had shifted too fast, like their small world had grown too large overnight. Jacob woke before the rooster. His boots found the floor as they always had, but his shoulders felt looser somehow, less bound by grief. He moved through the motions, coffee, stoking the fire, checking the weather instruments, not because of habit anymore, but because there were people now who'd notice if he didn't. When he passed the cradle, Anna stirred. Her small fingers stretched into the early light and then curled back into fists. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. June had already risen and was by her side, lifting her gently, singing a low hymn under her breath. Something old, something warm. Jacob couldn't place it, but it curled around the room like morning smoke. June noticed him watching. "You sleep?" she asked, not breaking rhythm as Anna nuzzled against her. "Some," he answered. "You dream?" "Good dreams." She hesitated. "I was walking along a ridge. The wind was loud but not cruel, and I wasn't carrying anything heavy for once." Jacob nodded slowly. "Sounds peaceful." "It was," she whispered. "And I woke up feeling like I'd left something behind, something I didn't need anymore." Jacob didn't ask what it was. He figured she didn't know herself. That morning, Jacob walked the perimeter with Ezra, who had stayed behind while Ruth rode back to town to prepare for her child's birth. Ezra had offered no timeline on when he'd leave, and Jacob hadn't asked for one. The old man had become part of the rhythm now, a steady presence with sharp eyes and a quiet way of reminding everyone what mattered. "Crenshaw used to talk about this place like it was a treasure," Ezra said as they passed the equipment shed. "Told folks he'd run it someday. He always did want what wasn't his. Funny how men like that never bother building anything, but always want to claim what someone else made." Jacob didn't smile, but the words sat well with him. They came upon a broken weather vane, twisted from the recent gunfight. Jacob knelt and began prying the damaged metal from its mounting. You think June's staying for good? Ezra asked casually. Jacob paused. She hasn't said. But you hope she will. Jacob didn't answer, but his silence said enough. You're allowed to want that, son, Ezra added. Doesn't make you selfish. Jacob looked out over the plains, dry but alive, needing work, always needing work. She's lost more than I can name, he said. Same as me. We came together in the middle of it all. But what happens when the dust settles? What if she wants more than this? Ezra chuckled softly. Boy, you got more than most. A roof, a child, a woman who'd walk into gunfire for both. What more are you afraid she needs? Jacob didn't have an answer. He just dug deeper into the repair work. Inside the house, June wiped down the table with a damp cloth, humming the same melody from that morning. Anna sat in a wooden bowl cushioned with rags, chewing contentedly on a smooth stick Jacob had carved to soothe her teething gums. June's eyes kept drifting to the window. The land looked different now. Not in its shape, still endless, still raw, but in its promise. She'd crossed too many miles with nothing but grief in her arms. Now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she held something that might be her own again. Still, doubt lingered. She wasn't Jacob's wife, not in name, not in deed. She was Anna's mother, not in blood. And yet the baby reached for her, trusted her, quieted at her touch. And Jacob, well, he hadn't locked the door once since she moved inside. She wasn't sure what they were building, but she knew it was something. She stepped outside with Anna just as Jacob returned from the field. The baby squirmed in her arms, reaching toward him. Somebody wants to be held, June said, handing Anna over. She's heavy today, he said, adjusting her carefully. She's growing. Jacob looked at the child in his arms, then at June. So are we. That evening they sat around the table, Anna nestled between them in her cradle, and Ezra carving a piece of wood near the hearth. I was thinking, June said as Jacob passed her a plate of boiled potatoes, about starting a garden. Jacob looked up. We've tried before. Soil's tricky. I can try again. He nodded. You've earned that. She smiled, then sobered. I'd like to put a marker on the ridge. For her. Thomas didn't need to ask who. We'll do it tomorrow. They left at first light, the three of them. June carried a bundle wrapped in soft cloth, a smooth stone, carved with care, and an old blanket that once belonged to her baby girl. Jacob carried Anna in a sling. The hike was short but steep, the ridge rising like a spine from the valley floor. When they reached the spot, June knelt in the grass and laid the stone gently against the earth. No name, she whispered, but not forgotten. Anna gurgled softly in Jacob's arms. June turned and smiled through tears. She would have liked you. Jacob nodded. I already do. They stayed until the sun rose fully, warming the ridge. Then they returned home together. Peace, like spring, is never promised. It was 2 days later when the new threat arrived. Not with guns, not with smoke, but with paper and a badge. A rider came from the east, dressed too clean for travel, coat pressed, hat stiff, pistol holstered too high to be practical. He rode with the arrogance of lawmen who never touched the land they claimed to protect. Jacob met him at the property line. Marshal Wayne Dunn, the man announced. I'm here on behalf of Territorial Court. Jacob's stomach dropped. Crenshaw filed a partnership claim on this operation months ago, Dunn continued. Documents say he was wrongfully removed. He's dead. Still has legal rights. Jacob stepped forward. He tried to steal my child. He forged every document he brought. He rode in here with men. Shot at us. This land's mine. Always has been. Dunn shrugged. Might be, but until a judge says otherwise, you're squatting on contested property. Jacob's fist clenched. Dunn pulled out a sealed envelope. You've got 30 days to vacate or challenge it in court. There is no court out here, Jacob growled. There is in Silver Creek. You show up. Bring witnesses. Bring proof, or you lose everything. He turned and rode off without another word. That night, June found Jacob sitting outside, the envelope unopened beside him. She didn't ask what was inside. She'd seen enough to know. They're trying again, he said. They always do, she replied. I don't want to lose this. June sat beside him. Then we fight. Not with guns, with truth. Jacob looked at her. We don't have money for lawyers. Then we bring the people who were here. Ezra or Bertha, the girl who saw us bury Crenshaw with her own eyes. You'd come with me? He asked quietly. June looked toward the house where Anna slept in peace. I'd go to the ends of the world for that baby. And for you. He reached for her hand, held it, didn't let go. The morning they set out for Silver Creek, the sky was streaked with clouds, low, thin, like faded linen pulled across the heavens. It didn't rain, didn't threaten to, but something in the air pressed down on them just the same. Like the land knew what was coming and braced for it. Jacob packed light. A sack of dried meat, 1 canteen, a change of shirts, and 3 folded affidavits written in careful pen by Bertha Holmes herself. 1 from her, 1 from Ezra, and 1 from a girl named Mary Beth who'd seen Crenshaw draw on June during the first confrontation. The signatures weren't notarized, but they were real. Honest hands, truth carried in ink. They hitched the reinforced wagon at first light. Ezra held the reins, his face drawn, eyes steady. He would drive. His daughter Ruth had begged him not to go, begged Jacob not to drag him into another man's battle. But Ezra had only said one thing. When a good man stands up, you stand with him. June sat in the back of the wagon with Anna cradled in her arms, wrapped tight in a knit shawl sent over by one of the women from town. The baby's cheeks were full and pink from weeks of real food, her eyes brighter than the first time she'd been held under this roof. She had no idea where they were going, what waited in that courtroom. She only knew she was with the people who loved her. And that was enough. The journey took 2 days. Silver Creek sat nestled in a valley past the dried-out riverbed, where the clay turned silver gray and wagons dipped so low they scraped the earth. It had grown since Jacob last saw it, 10 years prior, before Mary, before Anna, before everything. New storefronts, a proper courthouse, a town square with benches instead of stumps. But the people, they looked the same. Suspicious, tired, curious about any new wagon that dared roll through. Jacob kept his head down. June didn't. She met the eyes of every person who stared, defiant in the silence. Let them look, she thought. Let them wonder. She had a baby on her hip and a man beside her who'd bled to keep them both alive. That was nothing to lower her head over. They found a small inn with 1 clean room. Ezra insisted June and Anna take the bed while he and Jacob split the floor. No one complained. That night, Jacob sat at the window, staring out over the lamplights of Silver Creek. They've got judges here now, he murmured. Real ones. They wear robes, swear oaths. I remember when this town settled scores with bullets. June sat on the edge of the bed, rocking Anna gently. Maybe it still does. Just wears better clothes. Jacob looked back at her. What if we lose? She met his eyes. Then we start over. With what? With each other. The silence held between them like a fragile thing. Then Anna yawned, loud and wet, and both of them chuckled softly. Jacob stood and crossed the room. Can I? June handed the baby over, and Jacob held her to his chest, her heartbeat fluttering against his like a bird behind ribs. She's grown, he whispered. So have you, June said. The courtroom was smaller than expected, just 2 rows of benches, a thick counter for the judge, and dust motes that danced in shafts of light like they didn't care who won or lost. Judge Merriweather was a round man with thick glasses and a mouth that pursed when he read. He looked over the documents slowly, nodding here and there, making small noises in the back of his throat. The prosecutor, a thin man named Hadley, presented the claim Crenshaw had filed. It was full of holes, contradictions, and sloppy phrasing, but it was sealed. That gave it weight. Mr. Morrison, the judge said, looking up. You claim this land and operation are yours? Yes, sir. You have deeds. I've got the original territorial grant from my grandfather, signed, dated, stamped by territorial authority. Hadley scoffed. That paper's 30 years old. It's older than Crenshaw's lies, Jacob replied. Merriweather frowned at the tone, but said nothing. He turned to June. And you, Miss Hartwell, You live on this land as well? I do. Help raise the child, maintain the equipment, run the household. You're not married? No, sir. He looked at Anna. The child, she's yours? She's ours, June said firmly. Her blood may not be mine, but I'd bleed for her just the same. The judge studied the papers one final time, then looked up. This court recognizes Jacob Morrison as the rightful owner of the land and dust hunting operation in question. All prior claims filed by Crenshaw are hereby nullified. The gavel dropped. Hard, final. June let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Jacob reached for her hand, held it tighter than before. Outside, the street was bright. The sun had returned fully, banishing the silver-gray shadows. People had gathered around the courthouse steps. Not many, but enough. They nodded at Jacob, at June, at the baby who now kicked her legs with delight. Ezra slapped Jacob on the back. Told you. Jacob nodded. Yeah. Now let's get home. The journey back felt shorter. June rode up front this time, Anna in her lap, one hand on the reins when Ezra dozed. Jacob walked alongside for miles, boots crunching in rhythm with the wheels, eyes scanning the horizon like he expected something else to rise and challenge what they'd won. But nothing came. Just wind and peace. Back at the homestead, the equipment hummed a welcome in the breeze. The chickens, fed by Bertha and the others in their absence, pecked at the dirt with casual disinterest. The porch sagged a little more, but it stood. The hearth inside still smelled of pine smoke. The cradle was right where they left it. Jacob set his bag down and looked around. It was home. So, June stepped in behind him, Anna on her hip. I never had a place like this, she said. You do now. June turned to him, eyes bright. You sure? Jacob nodded. I fought for it, bled for it, buried enemies over it. And you're the best thing in it. June laughed, soft and full. I should be flattered. You should be loved. She looked at him. And you? I should be forgiven. She leaned in. Then forgive yourself, because I already have. He kissed her then, not rushed, not uncertain, just right. And Anna squealed between them like she knew exactly what it meant. Summer came early that year. The snow melt thinned quicker than expected, feeding creeks that swelled briefly before settling into lazy warmth. Grass sprouted where dust once reigned. Birds built nests in the rafters of the equipment shed. The valley, long scarred by silence and sorrow, began to breathe again. So did Jacob, June, and little Anna made their lives in rhythm with the land. Quiet, deliberate, stitched with small joys that once would have gone unnoticed. Mornings began with soft clatter in the kitchen, June at the stove, Anna babbling from the cradle. Jacob took to waking before sunrise, checking weather instruments not because he feared storms, but because he had something worth protecting from them. Ezra stayed on through the first planting. Said he'd leave once the first green broke the soil. But every day he found a reason to linger, fixed the storm cellar door, repaired a broken axle on the wagon, built a bench under the cottonwood tree for Ruth when she visited with her newborn boy, a stout, pink-faced infant who cried like a rooster and clung to Ezra's finger like it was the last thing in the world. It's funny, Ezra said one afternoon as he and Jacob hauled equipment into the shed. How men go looking for peace like it's a town on a map. Then it sneaks up on you in the face of a baby, or a woman, or a field that finally gives back. Jacob nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Took me too long to realize it wasn't something you find. It's something you make. The sun hung low by the time they finished. June stood at the porch, waving a cloth as they approached. Supper's hot. Come before it burns. Inside, the table was set, simple bowls of potato stew, thick bread, goat cheese wrapped in leaves. Anna clapped from her high chair, gums showing in a gummy smile that melted every part of Jacob that had once grown hard. They ate like people who'd known hunger. They laughed like people who'd been silent too long. They prayed not out of ritual, but from gratitude. That night, after Ezra retired to the spare room and the fire had turned to coals, Jacob and June sat on the porch with Anna nestled between them in a blanket. The stars were fierce that night, bright, close, unblinking. I never thought I'd make it this far, June said, voice soft. I never thought I'd want to, Jacob replied. June leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to think God had forgotten me, left me to suffer for some reason I didn't understand. But now I think maybe he was just making room. For what? For all this. Jacob reached over and placed his hand on hers. You gave me back a reason to believe in tomorrow. She smiled. You gave me a reason to believe I could still be a mother. Anna stirred in her blanket, made a small noise, then settled again. She's going to grow up strong, Jacob said. She already is, June whispered. The seasons passed. Spring bloomed into summer, and summer melted into a long golden autumn. June's garden took root, sprouting beans, carrots, even squash in the lean corners behind the cabin. The town folk came by more often, dropping off seed, offering trade, sharing news. Anna grew faster than the calendar allowed, taking her first steps across the porch with Jacob holding one hand and June the other. Her first word was Ma. June cried for an hour afterward, then baked 2 loaves of bread and gave one to the widow down the trail who'd helped during planting season. For gratitude, she said, though the woman never asked what for. Jacob built a second cradle that fall, not out of need but hope. He carved birds into the frame, not because Anna liked them, though she did, but because it reminded him of the first gift he ever gave June, the dove. The day he realized he wasn't meant to be alone anymore. He planted a sapling near Crenshaw's grave. No marker, just a tree, something that would live where his former partner didn't. A peace offering for a soul that never found rest. Ezra eventually left, but not far. Built a cabin a mile out, close enough to visit, far enough to keep his independence. Ruth came every week, her baby on her hip, her laugh loud and frequent. The children grew together like weeds between fence posts, sturdy and stubborn. One evening years later, as the sun set red over the ridge and the air turned crisp with early winter, Jacob and June sat on the same porch with Anna nestled between them. Taller now, her curls longer, her eyes still bright. I asked Miss Bertha today about the stars, Anna said, pointing upward. And what did she say? June asked. She said there's suns like ours, far away. Jacob smiled. She's right. But you told me once they were holes God poked in the sky so we wouldn't feel alone. Jacob chuckled. Maybe both are true. Anna frowned. Can that happen? Sometimes the best truths come in pairs, June said gently. Like you and us. The child nodded, satisfied with the answer, then yawned wide. Jacob lifted her and carried her inside, settling her beneath the same quilt she'd known since that desperate night June first knocked on his door. Back on the porch, June remained seated, eyes on the stars. You think she'll remember? She asked when Jacob returned. Remember what? That we didn't start with much. That she came from sorrow but was never defined by it. Jacob slid into the chair beside her. She'll remember what we built. That's what matters. June reached for his hand. He took it, laced his fingers through hers. The wind rustled the trees gently. The house creaked like an old man settling into rest. And the valley, once scarred by silence, now echoed with a peace no court, no storm, no ghost could take. They had begun as strangers, her with nothing but an empty stomach and a heart full of grief, him with a cradle and a wound that wouldn't heal. But in each other, they had found a reason to try again. Not just for a slice of bread, not just for a place to sleep, but for family, for home, for something worth staying for. And as the stars blinked above them, sunlight from the past and promise for the future, June leaned against Jacob's shoulder and whispered the words that had waited years to be spoken. I'm ready to be your wife. Jacob didn't speak. He only nodded, pulled her hand to his lips, and kissed it with the quiet reverence of a man who knew the worth of what he held. And inside, Anna dreamed beneath the roof love had built from ruin.